For those who are new to this discussion, I will give you a short glossary of the terms used in this video. Designation. Designation is a technical term that refers to the faculty or power to elect a person to a position of authority. When inferiors elect a superior, designation is the human element, as for example when people elect the president or cardinals elect the pope. Neither the people nor the cardinals communicate to the elected person any authority, they only designate. But when a superior appoints inferiors to help him rule a society, for example, there is, together with designation, ordinarily the conferral of authority. When the Pope, for instance, appoints bishops to dioceses, those bishops not only are elected by the Pope, they also receive authority from the Pope. Jurisdiction. Jurisdiction is a technical term that means ecclesiastical authority. Authority is the power to rule a society in view of its proper end. Authority comes from God, not from men. In the Catholic Church, the person who enjoys supreme and universal jurisdiction is the Pope. The bishops of dioceses enjoy jurisdiction in their own territory. Novus Ordo. Novus Ordo is the popular name for Novus Ordo Missae, the new order of the Mass. This is the rite promulgated by Paul VI in 1969 that replaced the traditional Latin Mass in the mainstream Catholic Church. The Novus Ordo, or New Mass, is the Mass you find in 99% of Catholic parishes today. The New Mass and the traditional Latin Mass are sometimes referred to by the terms ordinary form and extraordinary form of the Roman Rite. This distinction came to existence in the year 2007 when Benedict XVI published a document, the Motu Proprio Summorum Pontificum, giving new conditions for the use of the Latin Mass. Keep in mind that this distinction is valid only in mainstream Catholic circles. Novus Ordo hierarchy. I just told you what Novus Ordo means. Hierarchy is the term that refers to the system of people who are ranked one above the other according to status or authority. In the Catholic Church, the hierarchy is established according to ecclesiastical authority. The term Novus Ordo hierarchy designates the organized body of ecclesiastical officials in successive ranks that governs the mainstream Catholic Church. The head of this hierarchy is today the person known as Pope Francis. The goal of this video is to give you a summary and critique of the different viewpoints regarding the legitimacy of Francis and the Novus Ordo hierarchy. Not everyone accepts the teachings of Francis. Not everyone accepts Francis' papacy as a valid papacy. Not everyone embraces the teachings of Vatican II. Vatican II is the popular name for the Second Vatican Council, an assembly of all the bishops of the Roman Catholic Church held from 1962 to 1965. The doctrinal, liturgical, and disciplinary changes that originated at this gathering are the foundation to all the positions that we are going to discuss in this video. Does Vatican II preserve continuity of doctrine with the past? Were those changes made authoritatively? Were those changes accidental or substantial? In other words, is the religion of Vatican II the same religion as the one before the Council? Are the faithful bound to accept those changes? Are the faithful bound to reject those changes? Are the faithful permitted to remain indifferent? All those are very important questions. The different points of view about Vatican II will determine the positions regarding the status and authority of the Novus Ordo hierarchy. The average Novus Ordo Catholic is not even aware of the problem, so in his ignorance he just goes along with the program and whatever he may get at his local parish. The first position we are going to discuss is that of the Novus Ordo conservatives. This is the position of those in the mainstream Catholic Church who consider the Vatican II reforms as fully Catholic, but in many cases badly implemented. They are not happy with the reforms, but their attitude is one of compromise. According to them, the Novus Ordo hierarchy has both designation and jurisdiction. If Novus Ordo conservatives are right, one must conclude that the changes of Vatican II are accidental. That is, they do not affect the substance of religion. This position contradicts the facts. If we compare the teachings, laws, and practices of the Novus Ordo, it is quite evident that the changes have been substantial. Sadly, Novus Ordo conservatives have fully embraced the Vatican II reforms, and they only retain some conservative values that spring from the natural law. The second position is that of traditionalists of the Motu Proprio, and this is the position of those in the mainstream Catholic Church who consider the Vatican II reforms as substantially Catholic but imperfect and in many cases badly implemented. They are very unhappy with the reforms and they are attached to the traditional Latin Mass, the extraordinary form as they call it. They embrace the traditional values and would love to see Vatican II disappear. According to them, the Novus Ordo hierarchy has both designation and jurisdiction. But they fall into the same error as the Novus Ordo conservatives. They try to minimize the authority of the Vatican II reforms. Some of them go as far as to say that Vatican II is not binding in conscience. This indicates that deep inside they are becoming fully aware of the gravity of the problem. They are not very far from realizing that Vatican II was not promulgated with real authority. They understand that the only way out is Sedevacantism, and they are not ready to go that way yet. The third position is known as recognize and resist. Recognize and resist is the position of those outside the mainstream Catholic Church who consider the Vatican II reforms as not fully Catholic and to be resisted. According to them, the Novus Ordo hierarchy has both a designation and jurisdiction, but jurisdiction is exercised illicitly because of public heresy on the part of the Pope and the bishops. They do recognize the authority of Vatican II popes and hierarchy, but they resist their commands, laws, and teachings. Even though this position is right in rejecting the doctrinal, disciplinary, and liturgical reforms brought about by Vatican II, and they consider the changes to be substantial changes, they are very wrong in assigning responsibility to the Catholic Church for those changes. If their position is correct, it was God himself who was behind the evil reforms, because, as we said before, ecclesiastical authority doesn't proceed from men, it comes from God. Besides, they must explain how the infallibility and indefectibility of the Church are preserved in such a situation. The Pope in the Catholic system is the guarantor of orthodoxy. The Pope in the Catholic system cannot teach false doctrines to the universal Church. And to say that the question of heretical popes has been discussed by theologians in the past and that it is quite possible for a pope to become a heretic is not an argument, because Here we are not talking about personal heresy in the Pope. We are talking about the promulgation of a false religion by a Pope and by the whole body of bishops. And this is absolutely impossible. The fourth position is that of full Sedevacantism. And this is a position of those who say that the Vatican II reforms are not Catholic and must be totally rejected. According to them, the Novus Ordo hierarchy has lost both designation and jurisdiction because of the public heresy and general apostasy of the hierarchy. And this is a Catholic position, a position compatible with the Catholic faith. It gets right the fundamental problem of Vatican II, draws the necessary conclusion concerning the lack of authority in the so-called conciliar popes. However, they do fall into an error by not making the proper distinctions between jurisdiction and designation. They say that by reason of public heresy, the Novus Ordo hierarchy not only has lost authority to rule the Church, but even has lost the power to designate. As we saw before, designation of superiors is a human power that must be there in order to secure the continuity of the society. If the power to elect the Pope is gone, then it is not possible for authority to be restored in the Church. Authority is a formal element which requires a material element as its subject. If the Church cannot provide a subject by way of designation, then the Church is finished. The last position to be analyzed is that of formal Sedevacantism, the Thesis of Cassiciacum, as it is known. The Thesis affirms that the Vatican II reforms are not Catholic and must be totally rejected. According to the Thesis, the Novus Ordo hierarchy has designation by reason of legal continuity, but lacks jurisdiction by reason of an impediment. The impediment consists in the lack of an objective intention to promote the common good of the Church on the part of the Novus Ordo hierarchy. The promulgation of false doctrines and harmful laws to the universal Church is undeniable evidence that authority is lacking in those who are in physical possession of ecclesiastical offices. This is the most accurate diagnosis of the current crisis in the Church. On the one hand, it clearly rejects all the changes that have substantially altered the Catholic religion. It concludes that those changes were not promulgated with real authority because it is impossible for an indefectible and infallible Church to alter the rule of faith. But the lack of authority does not take away from the Novus Ordo hierarchy the power of designation, since, as we said before, such a power is human and can be separated from authority. This is the case of inferiors designating a superior. Furthermore, the Novus Ordo hierarchy has never been legally cut off from the Catholic Church. In other words, even though authority is lacking, nevertheless, there exists legal continuity and material succession in the mainstream Catholic Church. An objection is able to be raised against this position. If the Vatican II material popes are not really popes, but only subjects of designation who never received authority, how is it possible that they are able to name cardinals, who in turn are the electors of the next pope? We can give two solutions or answers to this objection. The first is philosophical and stresses the fact that designation and jurisdiction remain always two distinct powers by reason of their object. The object of designation is to elect. The object of jurisdiction is to rule. So in normal times, the Pope exercises both jurisdiction and designation when appointing cardinals. In the present time, however, his appointments are only an exercise of the power of designation because of his special status of being himself designated to the papacy. The second solution or answer to the objection is based on a general principle of ecclesiastical law. Granted that Francis is not a true pope because he lacks papal authority, his appointments of cardinals are still valid by virtue of a titulus coloratus, literally colored title. A titulus coloratus exists when a person who lacks a true title is in physical possession of an office and is commonly perceived to have a true title. Francis, obviously, is in possession of the See of Peter and is regarded by most to be the Pope. The legal and material continuity of the Novus Ordo is the basis for his titulus coloratus. We can be absolutely certain that this colored title is able to supply the power required for the appointment of cardinals. In the past, even jurisdiction has been supplied by virtue of a titulus coloratus, and this was the case of the great Western Schism. So this is the end of the video. I hope it has been clear enough and helpful. Thanks for watching.